Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
One of our former players was back just for a Sunday because he was off of practice. He drove home an hour and a half from his college, and he came over to the house on Sunday and just hung out for an hour or so. And so, you know, we talk about basketball, we talk about life, we talk about his parents, and that was a situation where he just texted me and said, "Coach, I'm home. Do you mind if I stop by?" And so, you know, you're making an impact with kids if they want to come and spend some time with you, and they're only going to be home for about 24 hours.
Coach Rob Brost has been the head coach for 11 seasons at Bolingbrook High School in Illinois and is the winningest coach in school history with an overall record of 223 wins and 81 losses. He has won at least 22 games in 5 of the past 6 seasons, including 2 third-place finishes in the Illinois State Tournament. Rob served in his second USA Basketball coaching assignment as a court coach for the 2018 USA Basketball Men's Junior National Team Minicamp. Coach Brost also was a head and assistant coach at McHenry County College in Crystal Lake, Illinois. He spent 2 seasons at McHenry as an assistant coach and 3 seasons as the head coach. Earlier in his career, Rob spent 7 years as the manager of basketball operations with the Chicago Bulls Training Academy, heading up all youth programming for the Chicago Bulls. Make sure you have pen and paper handy and enjoy this episode of the Hoopheads podcast with Coach Rob Brost from Bolingbrook High School in the state of Illinois. While you're here, leave us a rating and review in iTunes or wherever you listen to the show. Your ratings, at least the 5-star ones, help other coaches, parents, and players find the Hoopheads pod, and it helps us continue to grow the game. Thanks. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. Today we have from Bolingbrook High School in Illinois, Coach Rob Brost. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's an honor. I know I'm following some other great guests, so it's a pleasure to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great people that have been willing to come on and talk with us, and so we're including you in that particular group. So we're excited to get the conversation started and learn a little bit more about you and your basketball journey. And so let's travel back to the time when you were a kid and talk a little bit about what got you into the game of basketball in the first place.
Well, I'm an Iowa boy. I hope nobody uses that against me. I'm a Midwest kid. I'm originally from Cedar Falls, Iowa. You know, our high school program, I followed it when I was little in elementary school, going to our local high school camp, Tiger Camp, and, you know, we went every year and just kind of fell in love with the game at a young age. Obviously, you know, being good at it, as good as you can be from a kid from Iowa, and relatively good at it. In Iowa standards was helpful, and I had some success on the floor, but really my high school coach, Coach Jerry Slikus, who has since passed away, I think of about 2 years ago, he was very influential in getting me not only to like the game, but then to decide that I would, you know, enter the coaching field, and you know, I'm sure we'll get into he and I's friendship as we move along here tonight. But, you know, that's what really started it, going to Tiger Camp when I was in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, you know, in the summers. And that really kind of jump-started me liking basketball. And then, you know, obviously when you're from Iowa and, you know, Magic is big and Bird is big, and then along comes Michael Jordan, and that, you know, you start following that as a kid, and then the love of the game just kind of grows from there.
So of those 3 guys, which one's your favorite?
Well, I liked Magic the best when I was really young, but then Michael kind of overtook the whole thing because he was the greatest player ever. And so, you know, I started collecting Michael Jordan items and Michael Jordan Wheaties boxes, and, you know, I tried to get Michael Jordan shoes, although my parents really wouldn't let me because they were so expensive. So, you know, Jordan kind of eventually, you know, took over. I was a Laker fan as opposed to a Celtic fan in the early 80s, so that's kind of what got me going on Magic a little bit. And then, you know, when Michael came a few years later, when he really hit his prime, that kind of took over the whole spectrum. I really just loved Michael Jordan and everything about him, really.
Yeah, I'm with you on both counts. In the Lakers Celtics rivalry, I was definitely on the Lakers side. I was a Magic guy as opposed to a Bird guy. Although if I look back retrospectively now, I mean, at the time I hated Larry Bird, and I used to argue with my dad about, he liked Bird, and I was like, I'm a Magic guy, and now I think if I look back, I'd have a lot more respect for Larry Bird than I did at the time when I was 14 or 15 years old. And then Michael, I'm with you 100% on Jordan. We have, obviously there's a lot of arguments being made here with people who are fans of LeBron in Cleveland and trying to make the argument that LeBron is better or is going to eventually have a better career, and I just can't stomach that. There's no possible way, if you watched Michael play, that you would ever pick LeBron over Jordan. It's just unfathomable to me.
Maybe if he wins a championship with this cast of characters this year, I might start thinking about it. But
yeah, I mean, that's possible. It's funny. I was just watching Basketball: A Love Story right before you guys called, and it was about Michael Jordan, about how he kind of just changed the whole landscape of basketball as we knew it at that time. And, going back to, the Olympic team in '84 and then moving on to, the 63-point game against the Celtics. And that kind of was really his coming out party. And then, then he just kind of took over the whole landscape after that. So, just being reminded of that, not that I needed to be, but just being reminded of that, I kind of just want to record that and keep playing it over and over on my Twitter for anybody that thinks LeBron is better.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I tell people all the time that, and maybe I'm a little bit clouded because when you're rooting for your hometown team here with the Cavs, you feel a little bit, maybe a greater sense of angst when something's happening. But when I watched Jordan, there was never a doubt, and that's not to say he succeeded every single time that he had an opportunity to finish a game or make a game-winning shot, but I felt 100% confident that he was going to figure out a way to get it done, and 90% of the time or whatever it is, he got it done, and I just never felt that way, and I guess I continue to never feel that way about LeBron, and to me, that really is what separates the two of them, is that when the chips are down, I'd much rather have the ball in Michael Jordan's hands than have the ball in LeBron's hands. And again, LeBron's great, and he may end up being the second greatest player of all time, and he may have the most unassailable career statistics of anybody out there. But if you're talking about giving me each guy at their peak, I'm with you, Rob. I think Jordan, hands down. It's not even close.
Yeah, I'm definitely a Jordan guy, mostly because he's a product of when I was growing up, and first as a fan and now as a coach, and all the, just the things you don't have to coach with him, like exactly what you said. He's going to figure out a way to get it done, and those traits are so rare, especially today, with young players and even older players and players in the NBA. The ability to just get it done through adversity or whatever you come across is so rare, and that's definitely the trait that Michael Jordan had, greater than really anybody ever.
Yeah, I don't think there's any comparison. I think that from that, mentality of I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it done, I think that he has no peer in that area, and I think that's the one thing, the mental toughness. You can argue that other guys' skill sets maybe were comparable or better in some cases, but you cannot argue with the fact that there was just no way he was going to allow himself to get beat. I think that competitiveness is what set him apart and makes him different from anybody that's ever played the game. And so to kind of go along, and let's leave our pro basketball arguments aside. Think about when you mentioned about players today and sort of maybe the difference between players of an earlier era when maybe you or I were back playing and coming up in the game. How do you think the competitiveness of the kids that you coach today might be different from kids, say, 20 or 30 years ago? Or do you think there is a difference, or no?
I think kids are still competitive now, but I think it's maybe for different reasons. Back when I played, even in my high school days and college days, and Guys wanted to prove they were the best players in the gym just because they wanted to be the best players in the gym, not because they wanted to, put it on social media or have somebody else put it on social media and then have a like from somebody else or something of that nature, or that they would move up in the rankings. I'm getting old enough now. There was rankings, of course, but there was nothing like what it is now. And so the value system of kids sometimes nowadays, in a large part, no fault of their own, it's just different. And it's one of the hardest things to teach now is the ability to compete night in and night out, on a daily basis in practice and then in games as well.
How do you do that then? So as a high school coach and you're trying to instill that competitiveness into your team, what are some things that you do or some ways that you try to go about instilling that type of competitiveness that maybe a kid might have had differently back, earlier in time?
Yeah, I think, we just had our staff meeting for our season with my staff tonight before I got on this with you, and we were talking about how our major focus this year is going to be to develop habits in our players and to develop competitive habits daily. And then when the game gets there, it kind of takes care of itself. And obviously, when you have a program like what we have, we have a target on our back every time we lace them up. And, we embrace that and we use it as a good thing. And so everything we do in practice is competitive. We keep score of everything. We make everything a competition. And then, obviously the flip side of that is we give our kids what they need off the floor too. And sometimes that's a size 12 in their rear end, but sometimes it's a hug. Sometimes it's a discussion. Sometimes, it's something else. So, you really have to, these days as a coach, you wear many hats and you really try to get to know your kids. And once they trust you, the competitive side of them comes out because they want to play for you. And they want to continue what has been going on in our case for the last, this is my 12th year. So for the last 8 or so years, we've been pretty good. And so, they take that as a sign of respect and pride to continue the efforts from guys before them.
How is it different in terms of when you're talking about some of the things that you might do off the floor or things that are not basketball X's and O's? Do you find yourself doing more of those things today than you did, say, in year one of your program? Is that something that's evolved, or were you kind of doing that right from the very beginning when you first got to Bolingbrook?
I think you're always evolving as a coach, and you always get a feel for your team and for the athletes that you have. And then I think the most important thing for us and for me as a head coach, of our program, is to make sure that the players understand that I don't really care how they play. I care where their heart is, and then eventually their play will follow that. And so if their heart's in the right place, then eventually their play will follow. And that's a hard thing for 16 and 17-year-olds to fully grasp. And in large part, it's a hard thing for a lot of adults to grasp as well. But, the number one thing in my program is to make sure that our kids know that we care about them more than we care about how they play. And once you get that and you develop some trust that way, then I think the sky's the limit, not only for your kids individually, but then they'll sacrifice for the betterment of the team. And that's where we've seen a lot of growth in our program in the last 4 or 5 years in particular, is kids sacrificing, what might be best for them in their mind for what's in the best interest of the team. So, we do a lot in that respect. I spoke at a couple USA clinics and for PGC about building rapport between the coaching staff and the players, and that it's really a critical aspect of what we do. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a whole lot in common with some of our players. The obvious things, but I'm from Iowa. They're clearly not from Iowa. My dad was a doctor, and we were upper middle class to some might have even called us wealthy. I don't know. What I have in common directly with our players is not much at first glance, but once you show them that you care about them and you're willing to do anything for them or with them, then I think they'll in turn play super, super hard for you.
Can you give us some concrete examples of some of the things that you do to build that rapport, or is it more through just casual conversation throughout the time as you're building the relationships with kids, both in school, on the practice floor? How do you go about building that rapport that you're describing, which I know is so important?
Yeah, I think you have to build it with every interaction that you have, not only with your players, but with every person that comes in contact with your program. And so in my case, with our principal, with our administration. And so you're constantly building rapport, not only with your players, but everybody else that surrounds your players as well. Because, sitting where I sit, I need support of my principal, my superintendent, my athletic director, obviously, and then my assistant coaches. So not only am I building rapport with my players, which is the most critical to our team, but also with the community that's surrounding my players, including their parents or uncles or aunts or guardians or grandparents. Those things happen daily. In every interaction that you have, I was talking to my staff today that the most important thing for us to do is build positive relationships with our players, and that starts with every interaction that we have with them. So, it could be something as like having the entire team over to my house to watch Ben Moore, who's one of our alums, play for the Pacers, or watching Nana play at Nebraska, and the team just hangs out and we eat pizza and do something like that. Or it could be a tough conversation that I need to have with a player with an academic issue or something else that's going on in their life. And no matter what type of school you're at or community that you're coaching in, every kid has issues. And you need to find out what those are and really connect with each and every kid so that they know that you care about them and that you're going to care about them even if they miss the layup or they miss a free throw or we lose a couple games in a row.
How important, you mentioned your staff a couple of times, how important are your assistants in facilitating that process of, building connections with you and your program?
Yeah, I think, I'm biased obviously because I work with our guys every day. And when I say our guys, I mean my staff. But, I have 4 former head coaches that work for me now, and they understand what it's like to sit in the head seat. And so they have good perspective of what it takes to run a program. And that's first and foremost, I think, is to hire good people. And then secondly, when you hire good people, that they understand that it's about the players. And it will always be about the players. And that doesn't mean you let the players do whatever they want. It's exactly the opposite. We set very high expectations for our players. And we do so because we expect more of them than you do of the average student. And when we have our first meeting on Monday, we talk about how Bolingbrook High School, when you're playing on the boys basketball team, it's a do-it-all place, meaning you have to do it in the classroom, in the community, and then finally on the court. But you have to do it on the court too. That's critical for our program, and my staff is really good about building rapport with players. And then, obviously I'm kind of the CEO, I guess you would say, of the entire program. And, it's my job to make sure that our players are getting coached at every level, not necessarily to coach every player. And I know some head coaches have difficulty, giving some control to their assistants. I'm the exact opposite. I have one coach that's in charge of the offense, one coach that's in charge of the defense, a third coach at the varsity level that helps out kind of on both sides. And then I, kind of run the team and make sure that the team is running as far as academic issues, as far as social issues, those types of things. So, there's a lot of different moving parts to it, but I've had the same varsity staff here for 8 years in a row, and, it's really worked out really well.
Yeah, that continuity is really, I think, important when you have an opportunity to do that. I think successful programs, tend to be able to keep their staffs together. And obviously, as a head coach, part of your job, especially if you have younger assistant coaches who are good and they may have, aspirations of becoming a head coach, it's your job to be able to help them to develop and get them to that next position if that's what they're looking to do. But I think if you can keep that continuity, that's huge for the program, because the kids who are in the program know these are the guys that are going to be here with me through my 4 years at Bolingbrook or wherever the school might be. So I think that's really a critical piece of it. Have you always done it that way, where you've assigned roles to your staff? Or again, is that something that you changed and evolved that over time?
That kind of evolved as well. When I was younger, I kind of wanted more control and maybe thought I knew more than I actually did. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we have been able to win at the highest level now and in large doses, I think in large part because I've given up a lot of that control, not only to my assistants, but to our players, and letting them make decisions and not pigeonholing them when we play, and let them play with a level of freedom that they can make decisions. And I keep referencing our meeting today, but we talked today that our two major focuses are going to be developing good habits and then developing good decision makers. Those are going to be our two areas of focus when we start practice number one. And so in order for them to make good decisions, you have to allow them to make the decisions. And that goes on and off the floor. And there's going to be some mistakes and there's going to be some errors. And, these are young men. They have 1 foot kind of in the teenage years, and then they have 1 foot in adulthood. And so, they kind of go back and forth from those. And so it's fun to navigate, but there's always going to be bumps in the road. And through basketball, we've been able to develop, a really, really good program. But most importantly, we've been able to develop really good human beings. And that's the thing I'm most proud of.
That being said, what are some of the habits that you're going to focus on with your kids this year?
I think working extremely hard every day. We don't ever talk about how many wins we're going to have, or if we're going to win the conference title, or if we're going to make the Final Four, or, we're going to be ranked in the USA Today. All things that we've done, in the last 3 or 4 years, and we've done multiple times. We just talk about working extremely hard. And then, sometimes it's hard for people to understand this, but you don't really have control over the results, but you have control over your habits and how hard you work. And so we're going to work extremely hard. We're going to do things the right way. We're going to say please and thank you. We're going to say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. We're going to do little things like that make you a better person. When you start becoming a better person, then you got a chance of becoming a better player. And so, we really attack it from that angle. And go from there. And the wins kind of are just a byproduct of working extremely hard and then sacrificing for the team, and ultimately trusting not only your teammates but the coaching staff as well, and vice versa. We have to trust our players, because it is what it is. You're not going to, develop a 6'3" kid into a 6'7" kid during the season. So you have to figure out a way to win with what you have. And so that's our biggest challenge. And so I think working extremely hard on a daily basis is the most important thing for us.
How do your upperclassmen fit in terms of being leaders in the program to kind of guide the way for freshmen and sophomores who are maybe just coming into sort of the culture that you've built? How do those upperclassmen really set the example for the younger kids?
I think it's critical for us, and really anywhere, for your best players, whether they're upperclassmen or not, to show good habits, because once they do that, then the younger kids see the habits that they're developing, and then they see the success that comes from the habits. And so, going way back to Ben Moore in 2013. He's now with the Pacers. He would be in the gym at 6:15 on his own, even during practice, days that we would have practice after school. So he kind of started that. And Prentice Nixon, who's now at Iowa State, he's a guard at Iowa State. He was in the gym every single day, whether we had practice or didn't have practice, at 6:15 a.m. Then Nana, who's at Nebraska, did it. And now our two Division I guards, Joseph and Tyler, are doing it. And now you see Darius, our junior Division I guard, is doing it. One of our top sophomores, Keontae, is now doing it. So exactly what you said, the habits and the leadership from the upperclassmen, starting way back 5, 6, 7 years ago with Ben and then Prentice, has really developed into our kids just working extremely hard and understanding what they need to do to have a chance to win. And we talk about this all the time. If you work really, really hard, you have a chance to win. But if you don't work really hard, you have no chance. So it doesn't guarantee anything, the hard work itself, but it gives you a chance. It puts you in the game and it puts you in the discussion. But if you don't work hard, you're not even going to be in the discussion. And we play, one of the toughest schedules in the state, Simeon, Windy Young, Evanston, Morgan Park. And so to be, mentioned in a group like that, we have to have our stuff together as well. So, we're looking forward to a good season, but most of all, we're looking forward to getting to work.
Talk a little bit about the challenges of being a public school that only has players that come and grow up in your district, as opposed to being a private school that can attract players from a much wider geographic area. What are some of the challenges that you find associated with being a public school coach? I know I was a public school kid, never would have even thought about attending one of the private or one of the Catholic schools here in the Cleveland area. Just never was on my radar. I wanted to play with the kids who I grew up with and were from my neighborhood, and so I'm a big public school advocate. So talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Well, there's challenges at first because we have to ensure that our top 7th and 8th graders stay here, and by staying here I mean go to the high school that they're supposed to go to. And I'm a proponent of public schools largely in part because I went to one, and then obviously, I'm coaching at one now. And one of my pet peeves is, the national high school rankings, and it's almost exclusively prep schools and or private schools that recruit kids. So they're coaching high school aged players, but they're not high school teams. To me, a high school is where you grow up and playing with the guys you grow up with. And so I think there's a big difference in the two. So my first challenge is obviously making sure, or as best I can, that our talented players stay here in Bolingbrook. And that entails, making sure that they come to summer camp, making sure they know the program, all of those things, and they understand the opportunities that they're going to have here that maybe they wouldn't have at a private school that's a half hour away or 40 minutes away or something like that. So, basketball wise, we've really kind of separated ourselves from a lot of schools that way. But of course, the private schools still sell to our 7th and 8th graders that the education is better. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's one of the selling points that they use. And we've been able to, send so many kids to college. Our academic situation is as good as anybody's.
One thing you mentioned was like having a good relationship with the middle school and trying to make sure. Something that we've asked other coaches is how they work with the youth coaches and how they kind of start to foster those relationships like early on. So how do you start working with the youth and building the program from, third, fourth, so on?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for us in our community is our summer camp, because it starts with, really young kids. and getting them in the program, getting them around some of our really, really, really good players. And, during the summertime is critical for us because Ben's back and Prentice is back and Nana is back and Broderick is back and some of our top players come back and help out, and they talk to the younger kids, and then the younger kids see them and they want to be like these other players. And, they see the trophies in the trophy case and, the 1,000-point score, basketball in the trophy case and things like that. So I think for us in our community, I know every community is a little bit different. The summer camp is really critical, introducing all of our younger players to players before them. And so I think that's critical for us. And then, it's just being seen, I guess, kind of at the middle school games and to a certain extent to our city league games. We have a BCB program, so I try to be active in all of those things as well. That said, I have a family of my own, so I try to have a little balance in my life in general. So that's a critical piece as well. And my kids go to public schools here in Bolingbrook, and they'll go to Bolingbrook High School as well. So it's important to me that the program is good and that the school is good, because that's where my kids are going to go. I have a 13-year-old daughter who's in 8th grade and then an 11-year-old son who's in 5th grade.
Explain to people who maybe are parents of young basketball players the amount of time commitment that it takes to be a successful public high school coach in the year 2018, because I don't think a lot of people have an idea of just the level of responsibility, and like you said, being involved with kids all the way down in elementary school, all the way up through your varsity program, and then beyond with the guys that have graduated that you're following. And obviously last night you drove to Indianapolis to see a Pacers game to support one of your former players. So talk about that. Talk about the time commitment and just what it takes to be successful today.
I think it's the time is more about the people and more about the kids. For example, one of our former players was back just for a Sunday because he was off of practice. He drove home an hour and a half from his college, and he came over to the house on Sunday and just hung out for an hour or so. And so, we talk about basketball, we talk about life, we talk about his parents. And that was a situation where he just texted me and said, "Coach, I'm home. Do you mind if I stop by?" And so, you're making an impact with kids if they want to come and spend some time with you, and they're only going to be home for about 24 hours. So first you need to make impact with them. And then as far as the time goes, there's constant demands on your time when you sit in my seat, but I think every opportunity that you have to build rapport, like I told you before, with anyone that is around your program or has a chance to be around your program, I think it's critical. And they're making judgments of me with every interaction that they have with me as well. So, I think building trust with all of those people is critical. And then back to your specific question with time, there's always something on the plate. If you're a head coach of a program at a school this size that's been, where we've been. And I don't say that as a, woe is me type of thing. I take the responsibility very seriously as far as being there for our players, number one. And then number two, being prepared for the upcoming seasons and being ready, because, when we start practice on Monday, there's 3 people that can't have a bad practice, and the number one guy on that list is the head coach. And so, I really need to set the tone for them. And my example is the biggest thing that I have to show not only my players, but everybody I come in contact with. Like we tell our players, it's not for everybody to play at Bolingbrook High School. And in my case, it's not for everybody to be the coach at Bolingbrook High School. There's certain responsibilities that go along with that. And I don't take those things lightly by any stretch of the imagination.
2 questions from that. One, how do you balance? You mentioned that you have kids that are obviously in need of having their dad around. So
Yeah.
what little tips or tricks do you have for coaches out there? Because I know that's something that everybody struggles with in terms of trying to balance the time between your program and the time with your family. So what are some maybe time management things that you do to make sure that you can do the things that you need to do on both ends of that spectrum?
Well, just like I told my staff today, I have two new coaches with me because I lost a freshman coach to the college level, and then we have two guys coming on to the staff that are volunteering. But I told them their families and their kids are welcome anywhere we go. That is up to and including practice, the locker room, halftime. It doesn't make any difference. Their kids and their family are welcome wherever we go. And that, in turn, is offered to my players. I have a wife that's super supportive of what we do here. And just like Sunday afternoon, here comes a former player over. It's not unrealistic that a current player would come by tomorrow and just have dinner over here unannounced. Hey, Coach, what's up? You want to grab something to eat? Sure, come on by. That's not out of the question, and that happens several times through the season. I have the team over. So my first bit of advice is to mix the two groups. Let the players know how much your family means to you and that how much family is important to you. So it does two things. One, it sets the tone for your group, letting them know that family is, if it's not the most important thing, maybe your relationship with a higher power or something like that. I don't want to get all into that during this interview session, but it lets your players know that your family comes first, and then it also lets your family know how much you care about your players and that you'll do anything for them. So it really builds the relationship on both ends. I don't know how many times I come home and, when my daughter was younger, 8, 9, and she would say, and use specific names, hey, Dad, what was with so-and-so tonight? Just really in a more of a caring tone rather than a, hey, they played bad tone, because she knows the players. She's been around the players. All my players have been over to my house. They know my wife. They give my wife a hug when they see her. I mean, those types of things. So, it just sets the tone for your team when both of those entities, meaning your family and your team, know how much you care about the other. And when you do that and you show that example, then they start to care about each other as well, meaning my kids for the team and my players for my own kids. And so that's one of the neatest things to see. A couple of years ago when we lost in the region final, my son was just crying his eyes out and hugging like every player in the locker room. And that's neat to see from my side. Obviously, the losing part isn't great, but the relationships that our players build with my family is one of the most important things to me at this point.
I think it's a great piece of advice, and what you've basically done is you've expanded what could be two separate families, and you've expanded them into one big, huge family. So now you've combined your actual family with your basketball family. And I think for any coach out there, that's a great piece of advice of how to bridge the gap and be able to spend time with both sets of families at the same time. So I appreciate you sharing that, Rob. And then go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're up.
That I think some people might be like, well, then how do you deal with, your daughter's 13 and some of these players are 15 or 16? Well, I mean, the expectations are the expectations, and the kids are going to act how you expect them to act. And we talk about all the time how we're going to be respectful to not only to my wife and my kids, but to adults in general, and how we're going to say please and thank you. And so I don't want to get it twisted that I just mix them together out of convenience. I think it's more out of love and caring that the two are mixed together. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And, by bringing them together, you're allowing both your biological kids to see and be a part of that process, and obviously your players. And again, you're trying to instill some of those same values and those same things in both sets of, in both groups. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at here, is that you want to make sure that both sets of people are getting the values and are treating each other respectfully. And again, that extends beyond those families. That extends with when they're dealing with teachers and dealing with adults and dealing with people in the community. You want that for everyone involved in your program. So I completely understand.
Absolutely.
So then the other thing that you said a few minutes ago that I wanted to go back to is you talked about how as the head coach, you're the number one guy that sets the tone for having a good practice or being ready to play a game, and that you have to be, for lack of a better term, you have to be on all the time. And yet we all know that there are days when you don't necessarily feel on. And so what do you do when maybe you're having a day where you're like, oh, it's a rough day at school and something happened or whatever, and you're heading to practice and you've got to get yourself ready to go and be there for your team. How do you go about making sure that you're at your best every single day when you step through the doors of the gym? How do you make sure that the guys know that you're ready to go and they need to be ready to go?
Well, the first thing is to know and understand that it's never about me, and it's never about what my needs are. It's about what the team needs and what each individual on our team needs. We, every day, to start our practice, we do this active stretching thing, where they're kind of walking and stretching at the same time. And while that's happening, my assistants know that's not a time that I'm going to be talking to them. That's not a time we're talking about drills. That's the time that I am going to be walking with the players. I physically touch every single player before practice. Hey, what's happening? How is biology today? Whatever. And in some cases, that's the first time I'm seeing them that day. Some cases not. But during that stretching time, my assistants know that's not the time to talk to me. I am going to be with the players during that 10-minute segment to start practice. And it could be something as simple as a fist bump or just, hey, what's up? But we're all going to greet each other. They're going to greet me, and I'm going to greet them during that time. We're going to, whatever I need from them, whether it's a specific player that maybe hasn't been going as hard the last couple of days, where I just say something as simple as, hey, Johnny, we really need you to go hard today. Concentrate on your rebounding today. And I don't want to have to get after you about going hard. Something as simple as that. Might be something, going on in their family. Hey, did you get that straightened out with your mom? It might go into something else. So that's a really critical part for practice for me personally and for our players, because it's a time of connection with them. And obviously they're stretching and all of that stuff, but more so for me, it's a time to connect with each and every player before practice actually begins. And so that's one of the things that gets me mentally prepared, is that I start connecting with the players right away. And that's the expectation going both ways. And sometimes it might be a joke about a turnover that they had the night before in a game, something as simple as that. So I just want them to kind of have a little connection with me before practice starts. And they don't even really know that that's the purpose of that, but that's what it is for me. And then once that stretching is over, then we get after it a little bit.
I like what you said about like talking to your kids right at the beginning of practice and checking in with them. I think that's really important. I talked about this on our previous pod. I actually go to the kids' lunch every single day. I try to make it a point to like go and say hi and check in and see how their day's going, because it's like 2 hours before practice, so I can like talk to them and just see like, oh man, this person's having a real rough day, so we'll see how. And I kind of have a good mindset, and I actually like can prepare myself for practice as opposed to and kind of know where their mindset's at. So I really like that piece that you talked about, like checking with other kids. I think it's important because like you said, they don't really know that's why I'm coming. They just like seeing me. They like seeing me, and I have kids that wave to me and kids that talk to me, and it really works well. And I think it's all about building that relationship and the rapport with those kids.
Absolutely. I think it's the most important thing. It's probably the most overlooked. It was funny because I did a PGC clinic last April, and one of my topics was building rapport with your team. And there was maybe, 30 or 40 people at that session. You can pick whatever session you want to go to. And then an hour later, I did a sets and special session, and there was about 150 at that session. And so I was really a little, taken aback, but actually the rapport thing is much more important than the sets and specials part.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that.
Everybody thinks a play is going to win them games when actually it's the players that win them the game. We talk about this in that rapport clinic that I did, that it's not about the name on the back of the jersey. You hear people say that all the time. It's not about the name even on the front of the jersey. It's about the player inside of the jersey. And so it doesn't matter if you're playing for Bolingbrook or Simeon or a high school in Cleveland. It doesn't make any difference. It's about the kid that's inside of the jersey. And so you really need to get to know who that kid is. And, then you can coach them better. I say this to our guys all the time. The more I know about you, the better I can coach you. And the more you know about me, the better you can respond to what I'm asking you to do. And that doesn't mean we have to sit around and sing Kumbaya all the time, but it just means we have to be men about it, and we got to get a little vulnerable with each other in order to, take the next steps and grow not only as human beings, but then as basketball players as well.
And I think this goes back to you talking about how you've evolved as a coach. I think the way kids have to be coached has definitely evolved since even like when I was a kid, and I know it's definitely evolved, since some of the coaches have played. Like back then, the sets and the plays and everything were way more like featured in the central focus of coaching. And I think now, obviously, it's the other way around. I think the kids and the rapport and the relationship is the centerpiece.
Absolutely, because if they don't trust you, there's no way they're going to go hard. And one of the questions I get when I'm speaking all the time is, what is your team known for? Like, what do you do? I think what we do better than anything is we play extremely hard. And there's no way kids will play hard for you unless they completely trust you. And that they don't do it out of fear. They do it out of love, really. And they not only love you, but they love being part of the team. And they love to sacrifice for the team. And it's not for everybody. It's, this athletics thing and playing basketball at Bolingbrook is not for everybody, and that's okay. And it is what it is. And so some people can do it and can sacrifice, and some people can't. And that's just the way that the world works.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned how when you gave the rapport speech that you had less people than when you're talking about offensive sets. I know for me, I always feel like, you can find an offensive set, especially nowadays. I mean, you can find stuff anywhere. I mean, if you want to know what every single coach in America does, you can find that stuff, at a moment's notice. But I think what's more interesting is to hear what Rob Brost thinks about how to build a team culture, or to listen to what Greg White says about team culture, or to listen to what Eric Flannery says about how he builds his team around standards. And to me, those are the things that as a coach I try to take back and learn from, so that I can make sure that when I get a chance to interact with my team or my kids at a camp or whatever the case might be, that I'm building that rapport and doing it and borrowing ideas from people who are doing it successfully. I know one of the ideas that I borrowed from, and I actually borrowed it from PGC, and I can't remember if it was on their blog or I saw it through a video, but they had a little thing that they said, kind of to your point where you were talking about with walking with the kids during their stretching. So I've coached my son's team. Last year was a 6th grade, travel basketball team. So it's not like kids are coming from after school and they're coming down to the gym and the locker room after school. Right. They're getting dropped off by mom and dad. So one of the things I instituted with them is we did a little, you have to say hello and you have to say goodbye. And so when the kids first walked in the gym, they get dropped off and I'm standing there, they got to come over and say hello to me and my assistant. And there's your opportunity again to talk to the kids and find out how their day went, see how they're doing, see what kind of mood they're in, find out a little bit more about them. And then on your way out the door, it's the same thing. It's a physical contact. It's having a handshake, looking somebody in the eye. And again, you're still teaching things about character and about the way you interact with adults through that. And so I thought that was a great idea that I put to use last year, and I thought it was really beneficial to the rapport that I was able to build with the kids. And I think it was beneficial to them just in terms of every day they're having to have at least 2 handshakes when an adult looks somebody in the eye. So it was tremendous. I really felt like it helped our kids to get better. And so those are the kinds of things that when I go to a clinic, those are the things that I'm looking to pick up. I can pick up an out-of-bounds play anywhere, but I can't pick up getting out of somebody's mind some of the things that are, culture-based.
Mike has Brad Stevens on speed dial, so he can get any out-of-bounds play that he wants. Just so you know.
I don't know if I'd go that far. So I don't think Coach
that's
Jason.
good. We on our way to the Pacer game yesterday, I stopped by and saw Val and the guys at Butler. So they were talking about the Butler way, and that's big insignia all around their practice gym and around their offices. So it's funny that you mentioned Brad Stevens, and then his name is obviously prominent at Butler as well.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any program that you'd want to be able to sort of emulate, I think Butler would be a great choice, just based on the fact that, again, they're technically a mid-major, and yet the success that they've been able to have sustained through multiple coaching staffs is a testament to what they've been able to do. And I think that's what any coach wants, to build the type of program where even if you leave, that program is ready to continue to roll even without your presence. And I think that's what any of us who have ever built a program would aspire to. Not that you're looking to leave or we're looking to leave or whatever the case might be, but it could, and you've established the culture and the things that need to be done in order for your program to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
So let's jump backwards in time here and talk about your time when you were the youth basketball coordinator for the Chicago Bulls. A lot of people, I'm curious from this standpoint. One, there's so many people that want to work in professional sports. I'm curious about your process at the end where you decided to jump from that job back to a high school job, and then talk first about what it was that your responsibilities were and what that was all about when you were working for the Bulls.
Well, one of the things that the Bulls had before really anybody had is we had our own facility. So we had, and they still have it obviously now, called the Chicago Bulls Training Academy, 3 courts with the Bulls insignia. I mean, it looks like the United Center floor. And then what my charge was to run youth programming from the basketball side of things. The other side of our building was the White Sox. And they had the White Sox Training Academy on the other side with batting cages, indoor, infield, and those types of things on the other side of this same building. So the Bulls and Mr. Reinsdorf were really ahead of the curve on this, having their own facility just for youth sports and dedicated towards that and teaching the right way. So, that was my charge, and we had Chicago Bulls Training Academy leagues. We had teams, whether they were travel teams or just local. Some of them stayed local. We had shooting camps, power moves camps, all different types of camps for kids year round. And so, the great part of that was I was working with kids and working in a great organization. The bad part was I was working, when school was out. And so, the hours that you would constantly have were non-school hours. So, we were just starting to have a family. My daughter was 2 or 3 years old at the time that I left the Bulls, and my wife was pregnant with my son at the time. So, and then the opportunity to, turn the program around at Bolingbrook. We lived in Bolingbrook. I knew the talent level that was there, and I knew some of the issues, and I thought it could be turned around, so to speak, and we've been able to do that. So, it came from many different angles that I wanted to, take the challenge of reviving the Bolingbrook program and getting it where I thought it could and should be, and we've been able to do that. So it was twofold leaving there. One was the time away from family, and then the second, and probably even more important, was turning around the program and taking the challenge of getting the program to where I thought it could be.
Yeah, so you were looking for the next challenge. How did you get to the Bulls in the first place? How did you come to get that job in the first place?
Before that, I was the head men's basketball coach at McHenry County College, which is a junior college a small Division II junior college in Crystal Lake, Illinois, which is about almost 2 hours, hour and a half north of where I currently live in Bolingbrook. But the Bulls had asked me to do some work at their camps, just on the side. And so I started doing some of their summer camps, just running, they called it a team leader at the time. And I was all of 23 years old, I think, when all this was happening. But, so I was working camps for the Chicago Bulls, and then, they were building this facility at the time, and they asked me if I would be interested in coming to help them run the facility on a full-time basis. And so, at that point in my career, that was very unique. It was the first facility of its kind, really, and the allure of working for the Bulls, is something that I couldn't pass up, at that point. So for 7 years, I worked, with the Chicago Bulls Training Academy as the manager of operations there. And then now this will be the start of my 12th season at Bolingbrook as well.
Did most of the programming there take place in that facility, or did you go out and do remote things as well?
Yeah, a little of both. A lot of it took place in the facility, but like summer camps, we would be at 75 different locations in the Chicagoland area. So I was in charge of making sure that those camps were run properly, that the coaches did what they were supposed to do, that each kid got a T-shirt, something as simple as that. Each kid got a basketball, those types of things, coordinating appearances with players or other team personnel. So I just oversaw, all of the programming. So it was great in a lot of ways, but it almost took me off the court more than I wanted to be. And it almost ended up being more of an administrative position rather than on the court. And so I missed that on the court piece of it as well. And then, like I explained before, when the Bolingbrook job opened, it was just an opportunity that I wanted to tackle.
How do you think those experiences with the Bulls and maybe doing some of that administrative work, how do you think that helped you become a better coach when you took over at Bolingbrook?
I mean, the number one thing when I first got the Bulls job, we were having an all-staff meeting, and the first thing that was said was, your job is to make your boss's job easier. And if you're not making your boss's job easier, we don't need you. And, I was a 23-year-old kid from Iowa. I'd never heard anything that direct, but that's the point. And,
that's funny.
That I was kind of, bowled over by that, but that's in large part why the Chicago Bulls are as successful as they are, because they really give employees freedom to make themselves successful, but they also give you freedom, and sometimes employees choose not to use that. And so, I really learned how the corporate world works, I guess you could say, and I had some administrative roles that were, off the floor, and that's really helped me from, the head coaching side of this position that I currently have, in that, you're the CEO of your program now. And, our school is about 3,600 students. So, there was 12 guys at our staff meeting today just for basketball. And so now a lot of those are volunteers and that have been with us for a long time. But, it just speaks to people want to be a part of our program, and they want to help and they want to do things. And that experience working with the Bulls was invaluable to me professionally, and also from a connection standpoint. It connected me with so many people, and it got me in front of people that otherwise I would have no shot of even knowing or being able to deal with professionally.
Describe how important those relationships that you were able to build there and in your current position, how important those have been to you in your career, and maybe just mention one or two that have been especially key in your development as a coach.
Well, they always say you never know where you're going to meet up with a person again. And I have two examples that I could share with you. Right now, Brian Hagan is the assistant GM of the Bulls. So he's making personnel decisions, salary cap decisions, those types of things. And he and I shared an office at the Bulls Training Academy running youth programming, 20 years ago. And so my wife always jokes like, "Look at you guys shared an office, and look at him, and now look at you." So she always reminds me that Brian has really taken a trajectory much different than mine.
You can't get Brian. You can't get Brian to trade paychecks with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe at some point, but he and I did relatively the same thing 20 years ago, and we have remained friends, and it's just a great thing, and you learn how to deal with people and how to treat people, and you understand that everything is a business. That's true, but the people are much more important than the business side of it, and how you treat people and how you interact with them is really what makes you, not only a good professional, but a good person.
And as you got through that time with the Bulls, and now you're back at Bolingbrook, do you teach at Bolingbrook as well?
Yeah, it's a funny assignment. I have the in-school suspension room. For majority of the day, I do teach one freshman health class as well towards the end of the day. So, I'm dealing with students that, either got in trouble somehow or, did something that they weren't supposed to do, and trying to, help them along whatever path they're on at that particular time. Some of them are in there for one period. Some of them are in there for 2 periods. It just depends on the infraction and what happened. And so, I'm one of those resources for the deans to use. Why don't you go down and talk to Mr. Brost for a period and see, hopefully I can help them add some perspective to what's happening in their life. And just like with our players, every student has something going on that you don't know about, or they're dealing with something that maybe you would never realize. And just something as simple as saying, "Hey, how you doing?" to a kid that's, been summoned to the in-school suspension room, it kind of makes their day. So, some of the same things that I try to do with our players, I try to do with our students that I come in contact with there at Bolingbrook.
Yeah, I think that it translates for anybody who's a coach and a teacher. I think the things that make a coach successful are some of the same things that make a teacher successful. I know that's one of the challenges that both Jason and I teach during the day as our regular jobs, and I know that that's one of the things that I think educators sometimes get frustrated with, is that we're all being measured by test scores, and yet just like we talked about with offensive sets versus rapport. To me, the rapport piece of it is the more important piece of being a teacher, and the actual curriculum that I'm teaching is secondary. And I think, we sometimes forget that, and especially when politicians get involved. But it's great to hear you say that you're making an impact with kids, not just on the basketball court, but also in the schools.
Well, I hope so, and that goes to pretty much everything we've talked about tonight. I mean, you asked me about how did my time with the Bulls. It's all about the rapport you build with the people that you interact with, and like we tell our players, every interaction you have with somebody is going to eventually affect how that person thinks about you or how that person treats you. And so, if you can do a good job in that area of your life and understand that, this is about people, then you got a really good shot at being a good basketball player, or getting better at basketball, or getting better at being a teacher, or getting better at being a plumber, or being better at whatever avenue that you take in your life.
That is so true, that I think young people sometimes discount how important those relationships are, and that the ability to build relationships is, one, it just enriches your life from a personal standpoint, but then also, number two, when you treat people respectfully and you do the things that you're supposed to do, eventually I'm a believer that stuff comes back to you in a positive way. So kind of going along those lines, talk a little bit about how you got involved with USA Basketball and what that process looked like for you.
Well, let me go way back to my time in Cedar Falls, where I grew up. I played for a coach, Hall of Fame coach Jerry Slikus, who's in the Iowa Basketball Hall of Fame. He's got 600 plus career wins. And when I left Cedar Falls and then went on to college, and then went on to the JUCO job, and then the Bulls. My relationship with Coach Slikas just continued to grow. It seemed like year after year. And other than my dad, Coach Slikas is the most influential male figure in my life. And unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident about 2.5 years ago now. And so, that was, and I'm leading up to answer your question here.
Now we know Coach Slikas. We've heard some stories about him, so we know how he kind of connects the dots. So continue.
Right. Yeah. So that's I always say you never get to pick your parents. Well, you don't really get to pick your high school coach if you go to a public high school, and I was fortunate enough to play for one of the best. And then more so than playing for him is our relationship that developed after playing. And so, we got closer and closer the older that I got. And, when I got the Bolingbrook job, it really blossomed into, we would be talking to each other, I don't know, once a month sometimes. Sometimes it was once a week. If we had a big game, he would always call. And, Coach Slikas was best friends with Coach Showalter. So obviously I knew that. So I knew Coach Showalter. And Coach Showalter knew me from when I played, way back when he was at Mid Prairie. So I've known Coach Showalter for a long time, but I wasn't really involved with USA basketball until maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. I started speaking for the coach academies, and then most recently I've been a court coach the last 2 times for the 17U team out in Colorado Springs. So. Obviously knowing Coach Slikas and Coach Slikas knowing Coach Showalter was kind of my in, but, I'd like to think that, what I've been able to do as a coach and more so as a person is really what's gotten me in the door over there with USA basketball. And that's how basketball should be run. I mean, when you do something for USA basketball, whether you're a player and it's on your chest, or you're a coach and it's on your polo, it doesn't make any difference. It's one of the highest honors that you could attain as a player or a coach.
Describe for people what it's like to be there with, as a court coach with some of the best players in the country. What's that like? What's that experience been for you?
It's how basketball should be, because everybody goes hard all the time. Everybody's unselfish. Everybody's in it for the team. And in particular, when I was out there in June selecting the 17U team, the competitiveness of these kids, and some of them just a year or two away from being multimillionaires, and they know it, and you know it, but they take coaching. They went extremely hard, and the coaches that were there with us were not only some of the best coaches, but some of the best people that I've ever been around. And starting with Coach Showalter and Sampson and all of the staff there do things the right way. And it's all the things that we talked about. They're selfless, and they want to build the game and grow the game the right way. And that's what, we try to do in our gym. My staff asked me when I came back in June, what was it like? What was the deal? I said, it's really a lot like our gym. I mean, except for the guys can jump a little bit higher, and they're about 5 inches taller. But the drills are very similar. The culture is very similar. A lot of it is the same. It's just the players are a little bit more talented.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think if you probably could go down all the way to the elementary school level and go all the way up to an NBA level practice, you'd probably find a lot of similar characteristics in terms of the way practices are structured and the interaction between coaches and players. And so I think, to your point that we've kind of been talking about all night, is anytime you can surround yourself or put yourself in a position to be with successful coaches and successful programs and successful players, you're going to learn something. You're going to pick something out of it. Can you point to maybe one thing that you picked up from being at the training camp or being with one of the coaches there at USA Basketball?
Well, I think learning from guys like Mike Jones at DeMatha and Coach Flannery, who you guys know in the Cleveland area, and Sharman White from the Atlanta area, is their ability not only to connect with players, but to connect with everyone almost immediately and without, fail. And that's what I tried to do here, and I tried to do it even before I met those guys. But, just being around people that have the ability to connect with people and connect with at a level, not just to be a good basketball player, but to be a good person. And it's crazy how much we stay in contact with the group of coaches that were there in June, and then again with the group of coaches that were there in October. Just wishing each other good luck. Hey, the season's about to start. If you need anything, let me know. Just little things like that. And none of those things would be possible if either sides of the relationship didn't try to build rapport with each other. And so it goes back to everything kind of we've talked about in this whole podcast, and that's about the opportunity to build positive rapport with the people you come in contact with, on a daily basis. And it's not just about building rapport about basketball. It's about building rapport each and every time that you come in contact with people. And so my biggest takeaway was that. And then you get takeaways, when you're hanging around Kevin Eastman for 4 straight days, you realize how much you do not know and how smart a guy like Kevin Eastman is, and how, people realize now how smart he is. But, that's somebody I had not really heard of. I knew who he was, and I had listened to some podcasts with him on, and I listened to him speak a couple times, but spending 4 days with him on 2 different occasions is just a brilliant human being, not just basketball, but just a brilliant human being. And so the opportunity to spend time with guys like that is really, really beneficial, and I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, his book is tremendous. I think for any coach out there, if you haven't had an opportunity to pick that book up and read it and figure out and learn what his 25 words are that make a champion, it's well worth the $20 or whatever you're going to drop to be able to get that book. And we reached out to Kevin. We're hoping that said he was going to be on the road for most of October, and so we're going to circle back with him here hopefully in the next week or so, and hopefully maybe he can we can carve some time out of his schedule to get him on, because we'd love to be able to pick his brain.
Anytime you can just listen to him talk is valuable. We got 20 copies of his book for our team, and our team's going to start reading it together here, starting midweek next week, and we're really excited about that. But anytime you get a chance to spend time with him, you realize how dealing with people and how you deal with people is really of utmost importance.
So I want to wrap it up with one last question related to what you said there when you first talked about Kevin Eastman, and that is, you said that you realized that after talking to him that you didn't know nearly as much as you thought you knew. And I know for me personally, that's one of the things that I feel like just in the last probably, I would say, 4 to 5 years, I've really taken a turn from thinking that, I really had a handle on what it meant to be a good coach and how to go about interacting with kids and players. And I've come to realize in the last, again, 4 or 5 years that I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did as a younger coach and as a younger, person. And so would you say that that's the same for you? And how do you come about making that realization, besides just obviously talking with lots of smart people?
I think, when I was a 23-year-old head coach at the college level, I thought that I knew a lot about basketball, and I thought, eventually I'm going to be the head coach at Kentucky or, the Lakers or the Celtics or something like
right,
that.
Right.
That was my train of thought back then. And I'm almost a little embarrassed to say that was my train of thought back then, but it was. And I thought that I knew a lot. And most recently, the exact opposite is true. And I mentioned this before, but when I started to give away the control and trying to control my team and trying to control how my players played and control how they, behaved and control what my assistant said. Once I decided or realized that that's not how you best connect with people, then that's when our program has really taken humongous strides as far as our success and placing kids in college and those types of things is in direct correlation with the amount of control that I gave up. And so it's a weird dichotomy, and when you talk to coaches and when people ask me about it, maybe sometimes they don't understand it, which is fine. But the more I allowed our players to make decisions and my assistants to make decisions within the obviously standards and the parameters that I set, has really taken our program to the next level. And one of the things that Kevin Eastman talks about is a capability gap, and he talked about it for coaches too. For somebody like me, I've accomplished a bunch of stuff, but I'm capable of so much more. And the point is to close that gap. You've done so much, but you're capable of so much more. And the point is to close that gap up. And so that's true not only with coaches, but it's true with players. A lot of my players are Division I players, all-state players, but they're capable of so much more. So the ability to convince and help young people close that gap is the ultimate responsibility of a coach. And so that's what we try to do in our program, and I try to do it not only with our players, but with our assistants, and probably most importantly with myself. So it kind of speaks to what you said about, you think you know a lot, but really you don't. And when you admit that, you can grow so much from just the realization that, there's so much more to learn.
Yeah, I think it's about being humble. And
Absolutely.
When we're young, I think our ego sometimes tends to get in the way. And especially if you've had success as a player, I think it's easy to think that, hey, I'm going to stroll into this coaching job and I already know everything because I had some success as a player. And it really takes being able to set your ego aside and understand that there are guys out there that have been doing this a lot longer than I have. There are guys out there that are doing it different than I do it. And every single person that you come in contact with, you can learn from. And that's something that whether you're a 30-year-old coach, a 40-year-old coach, a 50-year-old coach, or whether you're a 15-year-old high school player, if you can learn from the people that you come into contact with and use those relationships to help make yourself better at whatever it is that you do, I think we've done a tremendous service for everybody to be able to share that message with the audience tonight.
Absolutely. And in closing from my end, Jason and Mike, I think what you guys are doing and what your pod in a short time has become is amazing. So I commend you guys for A, doing things the right way, B, getting quality people, and C, just doing exactly what we talked about today. You're just building relationships with people and then trying to help others, and that's to be commended. And I'm honored to be on with you guys. And whenever you guys need anything, if you're in the Chicagoland area or you need anything, you need a set play, maybe I know Stevens might have a better one than I have, but I have some too. Whatever you guys need, I'd love to help you. I'd love to be on again once you get through your slew of guys that are much smarter than me, and we can do it again sometime.
Rob, we really appreciate the kind words. We appreciate you jumping on with us. We really had no idea when we started. I've told people that I kind of had this on my list. It's been on my to-do list for about 2 years. Every time it was at the very top, and once a week I kind of rewrite that to-do list, and I would rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And eventually I just decided, hey, I got to pull the trigger. And so we pulled the trigger, and Jason has helped out tremendously on the tech side of it. And it's been a blast. We've had an opportunity to talk to so many great people. I think we're going to get a chance, moving forward, to talk to even more great people. We feel like the guys who have jumped on, like yourself, in the early stages of what we're trying to accomplish means a tremendous amount to us, because obviously a month ago you had never heard of us or our podcast or anything to do with us, so we appreciate you being willing.
guys asked me to be on, like, I don't know how I'm going to draw any listeners because I'm a Podunk High School coach. So, that goes both ways. I appreciate you having me on and trusting to me this little bit of airtime, and hopefully we connected with some people and made a difference.
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, I think the thing that we're finding is, again, we're still trying to define exactly what our audiences look like.
Sure.
I think we're starting to see that, we have high school coaches listening just based on the response that we're getting through social media and just people reaching out to us, and we're also getting some parents and players that are listening a little bit too. So we're not sure exactly ultimately where it's going to end up, but we're excited to see what the future holds for the Hoopheads pod. We're not sure where it's going to go, but we appreciate you getting on the early stages, and obviously, like we've told other people, you've got an open invite to be able to come back if you ever have a topic or something that you want to jump on and talk to us about. We'd love to have you back on at any point. So we appreciate.
I want to debate Eric Flannery one time.
All right, there you go.
I think that would be a great topic. Hey, he talks about LeBron, I'll talk about Michael Jordan. No,
nice.
I don't know.
You talk about public school, he'll talk about private school.
He'll talk about Catholic school. Maybe
I thought about when I was talking, like, he's going to text me within 5 minutes of hearing this. So
I was actually thinking the same exact thing. I was laughing.
Yeah, we were kind of in our heads. We were making faces at each other a little bit because when I talked to, it was funny because when I talked to Eric, and I told him during the course of the conversation that I'm a public school guy, and we had a conversation. I think the way that Eric approaches it, I told him I've known Eric for a long time. He was actually a student of my dad's, but we had never really had more than maybe a 30-second conversation, just knowing each other's in the circles here in Cleveland. And I told him when I got done that I had a tremendous amount of respect for what he had done at his program, and I walked away a much bigger fan of him and his program.
Absolutely.
And I can say the same thing tonight after talking to you and with all the guys that we've talked to. I'm coming away from the conversations a big fan, and we're looking forward to following the guys that have been on the podcast and all those kinds of things. So what we'd like you to do before we get out of here is share your contact information with people. So if anyone wants to reach out to you after listening to the podcast, they can get in contact with you, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I say this at the beginning of every clinic that I speak at and every speaking engagement that I'm at, that I'm an open book. I'll help you with anything that I can help you with, set play, inbounds. I don't hide anything. I think that's a great thing about the game of basketball, that, we're collegial in our efforts, and I'm willing to help anybody. So when I give you this contact information, don't hesitate, listeners, to use this. I will get back to you within 24 hours every time, and we'll go from there. But I'm going to even throw in my cell phone number, if that's all right.
That's fine.
My cell phone number is 630-965-9813, and that's my cell phone number. So, I'll answer that. My email is B as in boy, ROST RC at vvsd.org. So that stands for Valley View School District. So vvsd.org is my email. And on Twitter, I'm at Brook Hoops, BROOKHOOPS. So 3 ways to get a hold of me, really at any time, and I'll respond as best I can and help anybody out in any way possible.
That's perfect, Rob. We'll throw all that in the show notes, too, so people can see it when they subscribe or listen to the episode. And, again, we want to just say thank you for jumping on the episode with us. We really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. If you're looking for a great way to spend the holidays playing some basketball, please join us at one of our Head Start basketball holiday camps on December 27th and 28th, 2018. We'll have a camp at Hoop Guru Courthouse in Hinckley, and also at St. Paschal Balon School in Highland Heights. The Head Start basketball holiday camps will emphasize the fundamentals of basketball with individual attention given to each camper. You'll improve your basketball skills and have a ton of fun at the Head Start basketball holiday camp. To register or get more information, please visit our website, www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.